Good morning, Caroline.
Good morning.
How's it going?
Good.
Awesome. All right, you guys. Caroline Holler. Good morning, Austin. Can y'all see that this morning?
I said no.
Yeah, I can see
And
it.
then I sent them.
Okay, Austin, thanks. Okay, guys. So I was not here on Thursday. And so there is a lecture. It's very, very short. It's not your typical lengthy lecture. But it is, if you scroll down. Oh, that's supposed to say module 2, my bad. If you click on module 1, the lecture is right here. And then you have a little annotated bibliography assignment that's due right below it. I go into a lot about annotated bibliographies in the lecture. So if that word's freaking you out, don't stress, okay? Because it's all in there. How many of you have already done that lecture? One. Okay. Anybody else? Cool. So that's that. The thing that I really want to get into today is module 3. We are coming into your first essay. Okay. So let me give you a little spill of how this is going to go this semester. I'm very big on, if you're going to be in my class, I think it's super important that while you are learning concepts, okay, you're also learning about yourself. All right. College for me was the time in my life where I really started to figure it out. Okay. I figured out, what is my purpose? What am I supposed to do with my life? What does that look like? How do I fit into the grand scheme of the world? That to me is as important as anything else that you're going to learn while you are in school. Okay. Now, there's 2 types of research that we're going to do this semester. One is called primary, one is called secondary. Can anyone tell me the difference?
The primary, like someone saw it. The secondary.
Okay, primary, someone saw it. Anybody else have another definition?
Secondary or for primary or secondary?
Either one.
Well, secondary, secondary is usually like a secondhand account. So like
Second-hand account,
they
okay,
got told about it or they saw it in like some sort of edited video or whatever.
okay, good. Anyone else want to add to either one of those definitions? Okay, so primary research is when we go find it ourselves, okay? We go find it ourselves. If I am trying to figure out how can I get my 5-year-old to listen better to me, okay? And I go and I poll 20 parents. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What am I gathering?
Yeah.
Information. I'm gathering what? Primary sources, okay? I'm the one going and doing the footwork. However, if I get online and I scroll and I'm reading psychology journals, and I'm reading a parenting book, and I'm reading a blog, okay? What information am I gathering then? Secondary evidence. Guys, here's the truth that you will not hear in a lot of research writing classes, okay? I believe that both have equal value. Okay, I believe that both have equal value. Published research is great, okay? But here's also the truth. What fields are y'all going into? Medical, okay, what else? What else? What are the rest of you going into? Are you all medical?
Missionary work.
What?
Missionary.
Okay, missionary work, what else? Engineering, what else? Undecided, that's okay too. Okay, here's the truth, okay? So I told you about my son. He has a disease, very, very rare. Okay, 1 in 1 million. Isn't that crazy? 1 in 1 million kids and that doesn't have it. Here is the truth about him. Secondary evidence is important, right? Like they had to do a lot of research to give him this diagnosis, okay? But here is also the truth. When you are 1 in 1 million kids with the disease, do you think there's a lot of information out there? There's not, okay? So guess what that means his doctor is having to do right now? A lot of her own figuring it out, okay? We're doing chemo, okay? Is chemo working? Is chemo the best option? Is chemo going to stop his chronic pain that he deals with? Is it gonna stop the tumors from growing? Okay, she's having to do a lot of her own what?
Research.
Sure.
Primary research, right? Is this level of chemo working, or are we gonna have to bump it up and go this higher? Well, we're also gonna have to balance with his liver enzymes and his kidneys, and I know way more about medical than I ever wanted to know, y'all, okay? But she's doing a lot of primary evidence, okay? If he had a different disease that was super common, then what would maybe be fine? Secondary, right? Because there would be 100,000 medical journals produced about, I mean, the sad reality is there's more produced about something like leukemia than there is about this disease my son has, okay? And so there's 1,000 different ways that you could treat leukemia that she would know about because it's out there. So in that case, secondary evidence is fine, right? But the point that I'm trying to make to y'all is it doesn't matter what field you're in. Okay? Even something like medical, where there is so much published out there, you may find yourself in a situation one day where you're having to do what?
Primary research.
Primary research. And so for the purposes of my class, I make you do both. Okay? So the first thing that we do is a Myers-Briggs essay. How many of you have ever done Myers-Briggs? Your generation really, how many of you have done the Enneagram test? The Enneagram? None of you?
Is it like 45? It's like the IM.
That's Myers-Briggs. Yes. Okay, so that's Myers-Briggs. The Enneagram gives you a number. Okay, and the number really points to like a word. And so like, I can't, it's been so long since I took it, but I think mine, it was something about being like that I'm a take charge leader, more that personality type. It tells you about yourself, okay? The thing I love about the Myers-Briggs is it connects you to a field, okay? It takes your personality and it goes, this personality is really well suited for these types of fields. And so what do you think you can gain from something like that?
General idea we want to get, we should probably go.
Okay, it could. What else could it do?
You know, so you need to write you what you don't want to do.
What you don't want to do? What were you gonna say? Okay, maybe make you aware of jobs that you didn't know existed. Here's the other thing, okay? Do you want to know what when I took a career test in college, do you know what it said I needed to be? A corporate lawyer. Okay, which was really funny because at the time I was pre-law. Okay, it said I needed to be a corporate lawyer. Now, if you know me on a personal level, that would make a lot of sense. Like I am very opinionated. If I believe in something, I am standing on it and nobody's changing my mind, okay? I also love to problem solve. Like if someone gives me an issue, I love figuring out how to work that out, okay? I was pre-law in college. I interned for a corporate law firm in downtown Raleigh. It's a really good internship. I figured out in 2 days that I absolutely hated being around lawyers. Okay, it just was such a dirty business to me. I would just listen and watch, and we've got to have them, right? I mean, my dad has a business. He's been in lawsuits and all kinds of things. I mean, I'm grateful for lawyers, don't get me wrong. Okay, it was just, I figured out real quick, like, oh, there's this part of my personality. There's this part of my morale. There's this part of me that cannot do this. Okay, and I fell in love with education. Okay, or I really fell in love with writing and reading. And my dad said, there's no way you're gonna figure out a way to make money keeping your nose in a book. And I figured out a way to make money keeping my nose in a book. But here's the thing, there were parts of my personality, okay, that I had to really work on to be an effective teacher, okay? Because I am a take charge person. I am this is how you do it, and this is how we're gonna get it done person. So what do you think I had to work on before I stepped into a classroom? I had to make sure I was a little bit more approachable, right? I really had to work on, when I first started teaching, I really believed there were certain ways of doing things, okay? And I worked at a prestigious private college in Hawaii at the time. And so my students were all kind of programmed of there's a certain way of doing things, right? And then when I came back home and I started working at community college, and my first class was a night class, okay? I had 3 single moms. I had high school students. I had a 70-year-old man who brought me his computer in a box. He had never opened a computer before, okay? All of this sudden, my brain realized there have got to be more ways than one of doing things. And then COVID happened, okay? You think that altered my whole mental state when going into a classroom that no longer existed, right? I now had to teach students who had never, ever, ever turned on a computer. And I had to teach them from home while they were with their 7 kids, okay? So the thing about this personality test is it's gonna show you all the ways that you're gonna be great at what you could do. But it's also gonna point out the things that you have to work on. And so you may be like me, you may get a personality test that tells you that you should be doing something that you really weren't created to do. And that's okay. But what it is gonna point out is, hey, you've got this part of your personality. How's that gonna fit into nursing? You've got this part of your personality. How's that gonna fit into engineering? What are you gonna have to do to work on that or to tweak that? So that's really the purpose of this paper, okay? So Myers-Briggs, what is the Myers-Briggs? The Myers-Briggs is a personality assessment tool based on Carl Jung's theory of psychological types. It categorizes people based on their preferences, extroversion versus introversion, sensing versus intuition, thinking versus feeling, judging versus perceiving. How many of you would call yourself an extrovert? An extrovert. How many of you would call yourself an introvert? Okay. How many of you would call yourself sensing? You sense things. Okay. How many of you would call yourself you're intuitive? Okay, you're intuitive. All right. How many of you would say I'm a thinker? How many of you would say I'm a feeler? Okay. I definitely fell into the thinking category. How many of you say, oh, I'm a big judgment person? That's okay. Okay. How many of you are like, I'm more perceptive. I look at things from a big picture. I don't cast judgment super quickly. Okay. I would say that that happened to me. I don't think I was born that way by nature, but I had pushed more that way. Okay. So by combining these preferences, you get one of 16 personalities. Okay. And each type shows you your strengths, your challenges, your tendencies, how you interact with the world, how you process information, how you make decisions. And so it's really good for using with career counseling and improving communication, okay? It can be helpful in several ways depending on how it's used. And so here's some of the things that we're going to talk about in this paper. We're going to talk about how does the Myers-Briggs make us more self-aware and show us ways that we can personally grow, okay? How does it help us think about our communication and our relationships? How does it help you? And let me go to this, okay? While we're going to be talking a lot about workforce, okay, it also helps you personally. I am a thinker, okay? I very, very rarely make decisions based on how I feel, okay? Like when my son was going through all this and I was having all these conversations and having to make some really, really hard choices, okay? One of the questions that I got asked by someone who is not a medical professional was, what does your gut tell you? And I immediately responded with, I never make decisions based off my gut. I have to think through everything very methodically. I have lists. I am a pro cons person. Okay. When I was in college and I decided on whether or not to go on a date with someone, I literally made lists out. Okay. And that made my decision for me. I never ever went based off of feelings, or I was not a butterfly person. Okay. I still am not a butterfly person. So it's even going to help you consider someone like me. I'm a thinker. Guess what I married? I married a feeler. Okay. Do you think sometimes that creates conflict? Of course it does, right? Because I am thinking through a problem and he's going, well, how do you feel? And I'm like, I don't feel anything. I'm thinking through it. Okay. And so this test is great for career development, but it's also really good as you're self-reflecting and thinking through things on a personal level. Teamwork. How do you operate in a team? How do you think through strategy? What does work-life balance look like? Okay. If I'm an extrovert, I'm a thinker. Okay. How do you think my work-life balance goes? It's not often. Okay. I technically do not have to be here until 9 o'clock in the morning. Guess what I was doing in the parking lot this morning? I was on my computer with a student Zooming. Okay. Guess what I was doing at 9:30 last night? On the computer with a student Zooming, because my work-life balance is not awesome. Okay. What do you think I'm constantly having to work on? Finding margin, right? So it's going to help you think through things like that. Enhancing your personal relationships and building confidence, okay? Here's the thing that's true about Myers-Briggs, like everything else. Is it perfect? No. Does it have limitations? Yes, of course. There are limitations like this, okay? I'm an extrovert, okay? I naturally love to be around people, okay? I could never have worked in a cubicle, not for any amount of money, okay? That would have just never worked for me. However, something that the Myers-Briggs doesn't pick up is, even though I'm an extrovert, guess how I recharge? Alone. Okay, alone. And I don't mean alone like being at home. I mean like kids in bed. I tell my husband to go to living room and I've got to have 20 minutes with me and Patrick Dempsey and Grey's Anatomy, totally brainwashed, tuned out. Okay, no one's speaking to me, phone put away. Okay, and so that's something that the Myers-Briggs isn't going to pick up, because if I'm answering all these questions, it looks like I am good time Sally, always talking to people, can't get enough of being in a crowd, and that is true until it hits 8:30 at night and I'm completely talked out and I need 30 minutes to myself. Right? So it's not a perfect analyzer, just like everything else. So why is all this important? We're going to watch a video. Zoom, I need you to tell me if you can hear this, okay? Oh, we can. Zoom, can you hear that?
What am I hearing?
Could you hear that YouTube?
No.
No? Okay. Let me try something. Here we go. Why are you trying to do me dirty, Zoom? Here we go.
create a new reality.
Hear that now, Caroline?
Yeah.
Great.
At what point do you consider yourself a bad person? That was the question I was considering on the plane ride over to Nepal a little less than 2 years ago. Events in my life had forcibly brought me face to face with some of my least favorite, less talked about qualities. Second semester, second year, I was working on a group project. And I'm sure you've all worked with someone similar, the girl who wants to control everything and boss everyone around and shows up late to the group meeting without their part done. That was me. Apparently, I got so bad, a classmate from a different group felt the need to reach out to me privately to inform me that my behavior was that of a bully's. It was a word that reappeared on the peer reviews I received at the end of the project. This was horrible news, especially considering it piggybacked off the recent discovery that my super cute crush had called me super gross. Apparently, telling everyone you know you like a guy and interacting with them only when your alcohol intake is at a level where anything said is regrettable. It's not the best way to succeed at wooing the guy you like. So it seems easy now to spot the errors of my ways, and perhaps it always was, but it wasn't always for me. Because examining the reasons I did things meant acknowledging that my reasons were, well, shitty reasons. I would show up late to the group meeting, got my part of the project done, because I wanted to see the boy I liked so we could talk, and we could dance, and we could fall in love, and blah, 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 blah. And I was crushed when I realized the kindness I preached to others to practice was something I myself was unable to extend to my peers. And being called super gross by my crush at the same time just sort of seemed to invalidate my inadequacies. So I had to come to the idea that there was another decision that maybe I could have made. I have up on the slide behind me a game I'm sure you're all familiar with. Right? Okay. Now, picture these two options. First option, would you rather get drunk Wednesday to Saturday, show up to your group project, only half your part completed, hot pics of yourself on Instagram, maybe talk to the boy you like? Or would you rather, option B, go out for a night to dance with your friends after going to the library to responsibly finish your part of the paper, which you will bring to your meeting sober and on time on Sunday? Okay, so the sad thing is, folks, if you had have asked me the Tuesday before my group meeting what option I would have chosen, I would have told you it was option B every single time. And then, come Wednesday by around 4 p.m., I would have went and done the first option every single time. There are times in your life when you make a decision that isn't reflective of who you are. Let's call that decision a mistake. And there are times when people make that decision so consistently that gradually it becomes part of their lifestyle and it is reflective of who they are. I was crushed, I'm repeating this part, when I realized that the kindness I preached to others to practice was something I myself was unable to extend to my peers, and being called super gross by my crush at the same time just seemed to validate my inadequacy. So I wanted to change, half because I wanted to be a better person, and half because I wanted to prove to everyone else that I could be a better person. And because the universe wanted to make the lost little white girl into even more of a cliche, I realized all of this just in time to fly across the world to spend the summer in Nepal finding myself. So, it is here that I must stop and give credit to Renaissance College, the leadership faculty at UMB that nobody knows is a leadership faculty at UMB, for making us so familiar with the process of change. We had a presentation from my prof, Nathan Thompson, during my first semester at RC, after we had missed the mark yet again on our current affairs assignment, in which we were supposed to analyze a recent news article. There was one slide in particular in his presentation that I kept going back to throughout my entire degree. And no, it wasn't because of the Star Trek reference. I didn't get it. He was upset. So this is a process of critical reflection. And basically, you go through this and you ask yourself, what happened? Describe the experience. And then you ask yourself why that happened and how you felt about it. Now, then you're asking yourself, what is the significance of this? Am I looking at it in a different way? And then after you realize that, you go, well, what am I going to do now after having realized all of this? So, flash forward to sad Emma on the plane to Nepal, who was looking back on her life and wincing at the choices she had made and the person they had turned her into. And so she made a list. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. These were the values I wanted to live by, and I knew that it wasn't safe to leave me to my own devices. If I really wanted to become a happier, more fulfilled, compassionate human being, autopilot had to come off. So, an example of the reflection process. In the spirit of practicing humility, I was trying to be less jealous and competitive. I had a year's worth of group projects to go back to, and I could not fail another peer review. So, scene. My dear friend Kathleen and I were volunteering at a care home for Tibetan children, and being useless at pretty much everything else, one of our main tasks was peeling potatoes. Every morning we peeled potatoes together, and every morning I made it a competition to see who could peel the potatoes the fastest. I didn't announce it verbally or anything. I would just kind of run into the kitchen in the morning to seize a better peeler so I could viciously attack the outer shell, throwing the perfectly peeled potato in a bowl of soap before grabbing another one from the sink and starting the process over again and again and again for 2 hours straight for almost 2 weeks straight. Cue the reflection process. So, first of all, oh my God, I am really competitive, I've just realized. Second one, wow, this actually contributes really negatively to my surroundings because Kathleen is now scared of me and will not talk to me in the afternoons. Third one, okay, why am I doing that? I really just feel the need to compare myself to her because for some reason I really want to be better than her. Maybe it's because my crush called me super gross, I don't know. Anyways, fourth, now that I know this, I am going to make an active effort to be nicer to Kathleen because she actually is my really good friend and I do not want her to hate me for the rest of my life. Okay, go back. Okay, so, right. Yes, thank you. So, and a week later, it was May 19th, and I was writing in my journal about how fun my chores were becoming. We were listening to music, and how much improved my communication was with Kathleen. And by going through that reflection process after every conversation, every outing with the kids, I was able to pick up on ways that my own behavior contributed negatively to the situation or identified me with a quality that I did not want to be identified with. It's a spoiler alert, but you want to know who uses processes like this? Guys like Elon Musk use this kind of critical reflection process because they don't want to tell themselves nice stories about how their product is the most effective or innovative solution. They want to know it is, and the way they do that is by reassessing constantly what is being done, why it is being done, if it could be done differently, and if doing it differently could make it better. I want to take a second to highlight Elon Musk's use of feedback loop, which is a phrase that came up recently during a philosophy class that I take on evil. My professor, Dr. Jennifer Weed, used the phrase feedback loop to describe German philosopher Fackenheim's argument against the defense used by many Nazi war criminals who stood on trial after the war. Excuses range from, we didn't have a choice, to we weren't involved, we were conditioned under the totalitarian system we lived under, and thus we should not be held responsible. Fackenheim did not buy this argument. He said that in choosing to be blind, in yielding to the way things were, the Germans were contributing to the totalitarian system they lived under, keeping it operating through their actions or inactions. Yes, so Fackenheim described this feedback loop as a circular thought movement, and he used it to prove that Adolf Eichmann was more than a cog in the wheel, that he was responsible for his deeds, however banal some might believe Eichmann to be. For those of you unfamiliar, Adolf Eichmann is the Nazi member who is said, near the end of the war, to have expressed how he would leap laughing into the grave because the feeling that he had 5 million people on his conscience would be, for him, one of extraordinary satisfaction. Head of the Office of Jewish Affairs during his prime time in the SS, Adolf Eichmann was the subject of Hannah Arendt's The Banality of Evil. She's a German journalist, and she wrote this book after covering his 1962 trial in Jerusalem for The New Yorker. According to Arendt, in her book, Arendt diagnoses Eichmann as a cog in the wheel due to his lack of remorse and seeming inability to reflect. According to Arendt, Eichmann's case wasn't one of moral insanity. He wasn't a fanatical anti-Semite, and in fact, one of the hardest truths for the judges of his trial to grasp, if they ever did, was that a normal, average person, neither feeble-minded, nor indoctrinated, nor cynical, could be utterly incapable of telling right from wrong. Eichmann wasn't clever or calculating. He was genuinely incapable of speaking in anything but cliches, Arendt said. Some of the comedy could not be translated into English because it lied in Eichmann's struggle against the German language, which invariably defeated him. All this to say, Eichmann wasn't a mastermind of the final solution. He was lobbying to solve the Jewish problem by sending them overseas to start a new colony in Madagascar, for heaven's sake. Okay. So, the concern expressed by Arendt and others at the trial was that once the final solution was implemented, there was little resistance by those ordered to carry it out, including Eichmann. Arendt said that this was because Eichmann was banal. He couldn't speak because he couldn't think. And as a result, he was surrounded by the most reliable of all safeguards, namely from the words and presence of others, and thus from reality as such. But surely, if Eichmann had taken a minute to reflect, he would have come to the conclusion that killing is wrong, an evil act. But he didn't do this, Arendt argued, because of his inability to reflect. Eichmann went along with the crowd, just as I went along with the crowd of partygoers. Every weekend, I chose to go out instead of doing my group project. Eichmann followed the will of the Third Reich, just as I allowed my friends to convince me to go to ladies' night for the 4th week in a row. So, can we agree that taking the time to reflect on a situation could provide some important insight? Elon Musk looked at traffic in LA and he called it soul-sucking. Now, as a side project, he's building a 3D network of tunnels underneath LA to alleviate congestion. Expensive to build tunnels? Cut the diameter in half and cut the price. But what about flying cars? Well, Musk points out that a bunch of flying machines zooming above your head would produce a lot of wind and do little to create an anxiety-reducing situation. Elon Musk put transportation in his feedback loop and saw how it could be better. I put my interpersonal interactions into a feedback loop and saw how I could be better. And this is where the story of Eichmann loops back around. Because you could look at yourself and not see anything wrong with your actions, or you could look at a situation and find no conceivable way of making it better. My advice to you when that occurs is to look harder, more honestly. Towards the end of my degree, I decided it would be a great idea to come back and get another degree in engineering. I had been doing my honors thesis in international development studies at the time, and I had been examining the water supply system of Nepal's capital city for so long, and after seeing the effects of it firsthand the summer before, I just almost felt like I had to be an engineer to do my part and to give back. So I went back, and then I hated it. I forgot that I had forgotten everything I ever learned about math, and that I couldn't take the time to relearn it all when I worked 2 jobs, run a club, volunteer, and have 3 labs. And at first, that was hard for me to admit, because I felt like it was admitting that I wasn't smart enough to get an Eng degree. After my 3rd breakdown in the 2nd week, I asked myself, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? And is your why worth all the tears that are inevitable to your future if you continue down this path? Proving to a unknown mass of they that I was smart enough to get an ENG degree wasn't a good enough reason for me. So I switched out. And I endured the 8 months of fumbling over what I was studying or why I was still in school, because it was better to admit that I was wrong about wanting to be an engineer than it was to spend 4 years miserable in head hall trying to prove that I wasn't. Okay. And now I'm going to talk about how this is a part where Fackenheim felt Arendt missed the argument. Eichmann was placed in a system where he was ordered to do deeds that should have made him cry, but he didn't, Arendt argued, which she said was due to his lack of reflection. Fackenheim says, but what if it wasn't all about his lack of reflection? Maybe his desire to be a somebody was so great that he was unwilling to look too hard into what was being sacrificed to give him that feeling. Fackenheim found flaw with Eichmann because Eichmann did not think what was most in need of being thought. Although in the case of Eichmann, yielding to external realities was not the best choice and was credited to not reflecting, there are less morally trying times when sometimes the only thing you can do is yield, like the case with my crush. Being okay with my crush not liking me back was the first step in accepting that I wasn't super gross. Holding on to the reality of us being together required him having an opinion of me that he wasn't obligated to have, and it required putting my self-worth in the control of someone else's hands, which it should never be. So I stopped in a really roller coaster kind of way, with the help of friends, family, books, pens, and strangers on the internet. But I did it myself because in the end, every decision made was a decision I made to move forward. Pick up a journal, go for a walk, reflect on your life, your work, those around you. Practice perspective through a book, a conversation, a trip to Nepal. Use this awareness and knowledge to propel yourself forward. But don't be fooled into thinking that it is a linear process. It is easy to forget the revelations that you've made and the new habits that you've acquired. And when you do remember, it honestly really feels like you only go backwards. But I promise, it is 2 steps forward, 1 step back, the thing that keeps me moving forward, no matter how difficult it is to accept that I might never get over fighting my flaws or ever be the perfect individual I want to be, is by looking at all the beautiful people in my life, how they accept themselves and fight against their own flaws. And I feel inspired to do the same. See something about yourself that you don't like, change it. See something about yourself that you do like, love it, and let it go. Let it grow. You don't have to go to Nepal to find yourself, folks. Thank you so much for letting me give this talk to you. Have a good day.
Okay, so our sweet TED Talker is a little late, but that's kind of why I love her. What did you gain from this? What did you gain? What does she talk about that's so essential to our well-being? Reflection. What about reflection?
Which should be honest.
Self-reflection, being honest. What else? Say that a little louder. Holding ourselves accountable. Good. What else? Taking peer review seriously. Taking what other people have to say seriously, right? Why would she use, part of the reason I love this video is because you kind of have this spazzy philosopher, thinker girl who's all over the place, right? And she's bouncing from thing to thing. And then she uses very serious, in your face situation about World War II and Nazi Germany, why would she use that?
She's bringing up the excuses a lot of soldiers made where they said, hey, we're just following orders, when
Mhm.
a lot of times if you put a random person in that situation, they're gonna be like, no, what are you doing?
Yeah, good, what else?
You could have important personal reflections.
So we sometimes buy into this idea, right, that our own personal downfalls, our poor character qualities, only impact who? Ourselves, right? That the fact that we may be a person who's late to work all the time only impacts who?
So,
Ourselves, right? That the fact that we are scared to speak up in a meeting or scared to say when something is wrong only impacts who?
so,
Ourselves, right? The point that she's making here, and it's why I like showing this video before we go into Myers-Briggs, nothing is really about ourselves. Right? And y'all are really at the age where you're starting to figure that out. You're gonna get to the point where you figure that out more and more and more and more. Because here's the thing, now at 33, my ability to be healthy, who do you think is impacted the most by that? My kids. Okay. My ability to, so I told y'all I used to be a person that there was only one way of doing things and this is the way we were gonna do it and this is how it had to be done. Not a great parenting quality, FYI. Actually a very dangerous parenting quality, FYI. So I had to really work on that. I had to really evaluate, where does that come from? Okay, I was raised that way. Is that the best method? No, especially when I have three very, very, very different kids. When is that really not good? Well, now I have this medically needs son who his entire personality changed overnight because of chemotherapy. So my inability to self-reflect could have detrimentally impacted who? Those three kids. Well, now those three kids are in a public school system. So who does their ability to be healthy impact? Other kids, their teachers, right? The PE teacher, the little girl who already has a crap home life, who comes to school and sits next to my son, right? I think about the doctors and the nurses that I've had to deal with in the last year. I have dealt with some that are really, really hard. Okay, they've seen the worst of the worst. When you are a Levine kid, you are working with people who've seen the worst of the worst, right? And some of those doctors are so hard that the fact that my son's life is in their hands just sends me through the screaming night, because there is no compassion and no empathy and no bedside manner, because JT is just one of 10 kids that have tumors that they're looking at that day, right? But then I find this one doctor who the very first thing she did was grab my son's face and say, I'm so sorry that you were going through this. No 5-year-old should ever have to go through this. And guess what? All of a sudden, like, my faith in the medical system shifts because of a doctor's ability to evaluate and say, what does this kid need, right? So the reason I showed this video is because part of why I believe the Myers-Briggs is so important before we go into any workforce talk. You are a huge part of the equation and how you go about your job one day, right? You are a huge part of the equation of whether or not that job is going to go well. Medical people, people's day-to-day lives literally hinge on your ability to do your work well, right? Nurses make or break whether or not my son is going to take his chemotherapy well that day. Right? That's huge. Like, that's no small thing that you're dealing with. Engineers, okay? You have the ability for a whole city to either be in turmoil or for things to go well, for people's pipelines to run well, for their sewage not to be backed up. Our church has like this awful sewage problem next to it where it literally smells awful. The toxins are horrible, like 2 or 3 weeks out of a month. I think about those people that are living on that street. They're probably gonna get cancer one day from the toxins. That hinged on an engineer being able to do their job well. If they're able to do it effectively, right? How many of you have hated school because of one teacher? It's huge, right? That's huge. So I show this video and I do the Myers-Briggs because it is so essential that the first part of your research, that you research who?
So,
Yourself, right? You've got to figure yourself out before you can go solving problems in your career. Okay, I was not a good teacher or even a decent teacher until I figured out how I needed to approach the classroom. And that took a lot of self-evaluation of, hey, I don't get to think that everybody came from a background like I did. Hey, I don't get to assume that everybody has a computer at their disposal. Hey, I don't get to even think that my students have eaten before they come to class. Because while I think a lot of you probably have that privilege, I have taught some that do not. It was more important for us to walk to the food pantry than for them to be in class on time. Yes. Go ahead. So the first thing that we are going to do is evaluate what?
yourself.
Self, before we dive into this essay. Class is over. It is over at 9:50 today. Okay, so Myers-Briggs discussion. This is what is due this week. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and make these things visible, your handout and the outline. However, we are going to go over the outline in detail on Thursday. So if you do not want to jump the gun and start working on that, that is okay, because we are going to go over outlining what I'm looking for, how you're going to go about this paper on Thursday. The big thing for you to do between now and then is hit that discussion board and do the Myers-Briggs test. Have a great day. Bye, Caroline. Bye, Austin.
Bye.
Bye.